to give this talk today, and I try to put some fun pictures from my path throughout this presentation as well. I tend to talk quickly, so feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt me if you have any questions or want to discuss things further as we go here. And if at any time you can't see my slides anymore, or can't hear me, just feel free to interrupt. So we'll get started here. Just a little bit about who I am. So I am a sports psychiatrist with expertise in sports and performance. Specifically, I am the president of our National American Board of Sports and Performance Psychiatry, as well as the lead consulting psychiatrist for the Professional Tennis Player Association and USA Team Handball. My Monday through Friday job is that I have a clinic here in Scottsdale, Arizona, where we have four psychiatrists and three psychologists. And I'm currently on the mental health registries that are listed on the slide. And then in the picture is me and my not so short maternity leave. Uh, and I had a baby, and the team was in the playoffs at the time, and we just went right back into things. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this topic today because I feel like it's not addressed that much, and we're so focused on athletes, and the media is so focused on athletes during their careers, but then what about after, right? And we know that it's not an if, but a when athletes retire. And that identity loss when you transition from playing to not anymore can be so sudden, so profound. And then we know, right, what's likely to happen if we don't put certain safeguards into place or start to address things ahead of time. So transition out of sport is really hard. It puts athletes at risk, and we'll talk a little bit about how we could kind of build that protection early on. And just to point out as well, right, that even successful retirements can feel destabilizing to that athlete. So even when it's predicted or someone has announced that this is their last season, when they do actually hit that final game and the buzzer goes off, it can be really, really hard to navigate and that transition back to kind of what day-to-day life might look like after. So I just wanted to touch on quickly too, what is a sports psychiatrist? Because there's so many different clinicians that work in sport, which is amazing that we have so much support. But just to emphasize too, that really for psychiatrists that work in sport, we're focusing on the mental health and well-being of, the athletes, coaches, and other sports professionals from a standpoint of prevention, diagnosis, and treatment, whether that treatment is medication, psychotherapy, whatever it might be. And these are some of the functions of a sports psychiatrist. I won't read these at length, but just some of the highlights here of what psychiatrists can do. So when I was working in a team setting too, I did focus with people on, we'll get more into it, but what are you outside of your sport, and how could we build that now to set you up for success later on? This slide just highlights too that over the last few years, there's really been increasing publicity and attention drawn to mental health in athletes, and professional sports leagues, in addition to NCAA, have really come out with more policies and procedures to ensure there's adequate mental health supports for players while they're playing. But what about after? And quickly too, I just did want to point out this student athlete health and wellness study back from the end of 2023. They had assessed 23,272 student athletes and found the same trend across D1 to D3 sports. So mental health problems exist. Women, BIPOC, and LGBTQ plus student athletes reported the highest rates of mental health struggles. And then this was shocking up at the top of this slide, is that only about 50% of people said that they would actually feel comfortable seeking support from a mental health provider on this campus. So immediately in terms of this talk, I think about, well, okay, if they feel only 50% comfortable seeking support while they're playing their sport, what about after, right? And what can we do to make players feel like they're able to have that support during their time playing and after? So here too, from that study, you could see a downtrend, which is alarming, of people saying feeling like their coaches care about their well-being, and then also that they would feel comfortable talking to their coach about their mental health issues. So why is this on the downtrend? That is alarming to me. And what can we do to actually make student athletes feel more comfortable to bring up issues, whether it's about injury, transitioning out of their sport, or just mental health issues that are going on while they're playing? So, too, I wanted to touch on some common mental health conditions and risk factors in athletes. And here's a picture of Kevin Love. He's like leading the pack in the NBA in terms of talking about mental health and sport and his challenges. So I thought it was just good to include him in this as well. So some of the unique stressors and pressures faced by athletes. Go ahead and take a moment to read through the ones on the slide. And I think it's really important to understand these stressors because they are unique to the athletic population. And it's essential for being able to provide effective mental health support to athletes is really understanding the high performance expectations. I mean, whether that's from coaches, teammates, fans, sponsors, that can create significant stress. Now you have also the stress from evaluation and criticism. So the fear of failure and impacting their confidence. And that criticism and evaluation by coaches and media and fans. And then the physical demands and injury risks. I mean, again, it's not an if but a when with injury. It's going to happen. That's a part of being an athlete. And how can we set people up to almost expect that and prevent that ahead of time in order to be able to deal with those stresses more effectively? Then we talk about transition and uncertainty. People may plan as much as possible for the end of their career as an athlete, but if they get injured or if other things pop up, that they're going to probably experience some anxiety and stress related to that transition that was kind of unanticipated. And then there's also the uncertainty about their future career path that can contribute to mental health issues. And then I really like to point out too the media and public attention. So now someone's, let's say, announced that they're going to be retiring. Well, how much pressure is on them to figure out what's next and to have a great end of their career in terms of play on the court or on the field. All of these things can contribute to stress and pressure faced by athletes while they're playing and towards the end of their athletic career. Also, too, to highlight the prevalence of mental health problems in elite athletes. I mean, athletes are not immune to mental health issues. The lifetime prevalence of mental health problems in athletes was found to be 51%, slightly more in women than men. But that's a lot. That's a lot of people that are experiencing mental health and while they're playing sports. And understanding the prevalence is really important for early identification, intervention, and additional support. These are other things that really are some of the impacts of mental health issues on performance. I mean, if someone is struggling, it can impact their rehab and recovery. It can impact decision making, ability to focus and perform well under pressure. So really by optimizing athletes' mental health, we can then help with their ability to cope with stress, adversity, and setbacks. Just a few kind of quick slides on some of the top mental health issues that we see in sport, which is no different from the general population. So athletes definitely experience depression at similar rates as the general population. There's many sport and non-sport related risk factors that can increase the likelihood of depression in athletes. We diagnose through different screening materials laid out on this slide, and then management by therapy and medications. Here are some of the risk factors of depression in athletes. I'll let you read through these quickly. And again, you notice too, at the bottom, one of the big ones is retirement. That is a risk factor for developing clinical depression. Anxiety as well. So the prevalence of anxiety disorders in athletes is about 9%. Commonly, we see like general anxiety, panic disorders, social anxiety, OCD, and performance anxiety. And what's really interesting is that athletes in individual sports like golf or singles tennis may be at higher risk than team sport athletes to have anxiety, and likely because there's more of an internalized failure after a loss. Again, we can use different screening criteria to screen for anxiety. We can manage it by therapy and medications. And then bipolar disorder 2, there's not great studies yet in terms of the prevalence in athletes specifically, but we know that in the general population, it's about 1 to 2%. And then steroid use is actually an interesting factor for this as well. ADHD, another big one. I mean, this can certainly impact life after sport by a lot of people are able to actually hyper focus on their sport, and that's what makes them really good at their sport. So then, if you take that away, then after people can really struggle with their ADHD symptoms, whereas maybe they hadn't all their life because they've been able to kind of focus and get some of their energy out while they're playing their sport. So again, at the bottom, you see here, sport participation itself can be a physical outlet for intense emotions and stress, thereby reducing ADHD symptoms. So here too, we just see some of the negative symptoms that can impact people, but then also some of the positive ones. And like I said, some athletes with ADHD actually excel in baseball and basketball and these sports that really require quick movements and reactive decision making in the moment. This could be its whole own talk, but just know too that substance use and eating disorders do play a role in athletes and their mental health and well-being, both while they're playing and then after retirement too. So mental health really surfaces at transition points. So if we think about, injury, deselection or being cut from a team, graduation, retirement, identity disruption, all of these things can really impact someone's mental health. So again, these symptoms kind of emerge when structure disappears. So all of a sudden, like they're not playing and they're not in practice and they're not doing the things that they're used to, and so mental health symptoms can emerge during that time, kind of that feeling of destabilization and losing control. And really, transition points to like these unmask vulnerabilities that were previously contained. So, something to keep in mind if you do work with athletes, or if you're a clinician that works with athletes, or a parent of an athlete, if your child or client is experiencing one of these transition points, that's probably a really good time to not only just check in and intervene early, but just monitor for prevention. Okay, let's check in where you're at right now so we can ensure that you're in a good place moving forward. So this is my favorite exercise I like to do in my office when we talk about an athletic identity. And really, if you think about, college players, youth athletes, pro players, that's what they're doing most of the week is practicing, training, playing their sport. How much of their identity is actually as an athlete? So I ask my patients to take a pie, like you see in the chart here, and draw up their 8 slices. And if this pie represents your identity, how many slices of this pie is your identity as an athlete? And then what are the other slices? Is it a parent? Is it a sibling? Is it friendships? What else is it? Hobbies? What else are the other slices of this pie that create your identity? And a strong identity now is a performance advantage, but having a singular identity as an athlete is actually a transition risk. So again, it's not about having less of an identity, it's actually about creating a broader identity. So those athletes with more slices of this pie dedicated to their athletic identity are likely going to have much more difficulty with career transition. So I did an interview with the race car driver Danica Patrick a while back, and I asked her what she attributed to retire like doing well with retirement. And she's got so many businesses and she's got so many things going. She has like a candle company, a wine company, so many things outside of her career as a race car driver. And she said that she actually started building those things while she was still racing. And if you think about this, this is really brilliant because when she stopped racing, then she already had other parts of her identity. Already had other slices of this pie that was her as a business owner and her as an entrepreneur. And so for her, she transitioned really well out of her sport. And in fact, she identified still even it was hard for her to start running a business and not feel like she was as good at that as she was with racing. And even someone like you see that had so many preventative measures in place and so many other things she had already preemptively started working on, it was still hard for her to transition. So again, how can we help our athletes that we're working with or that are in our families create a broader identity so that when they transition out of their sport, they're going to be more successful. So here's some risk factors for a difficult transition. So involuntary retirement. So someone that gets that season-ending injury and they're out, and it's like, well, do I really want to come back next season? And they decide against that, being forced into it before they were planning on it. A lack of career planning. So again, when we talked about Danny Patrick, she had career planning. She started doing some of those things earlier. Poor social support outside of sport. People that don't have a lot of close, I call it their inner circle around them, they have a harder time transitioning because they just lose immediately overnight that team and their coaching staff and all those people that were with them every day. Now who's around? Financial stress. There's so much information out there about athletes that retire and then they just have spent all their money. And it's like, well, what now? How do I support myself? And then untreated mental health conditions. So this is a big one too. If someone did have anxiety while they're playing, if they did have depression and never really adequately address that, especially at these points of transition, it's going to be really, really hard for them to transition out with those untreated conditions. So some psychological red flags post-sport. I mean, these are just red flags for anyone, right? So loss of purpose, mood changes, irritability and withdrawal, increased substance use, identity confusion. All of these things can really create some challenges and make it more likely to develop mental health conditions that are clinical in severity. And so these are signals, not failures. And so it's important to reframe these as, okay, this is just what we're observing now. So let's get ahead of this and help you and get you to support before it becomes something more significant. So again, I always encourage early intervention rather than a crisis response. So take a moment to kind of read through these protective factors, and these are things that actually help. So again, we talked about identity diversification. What are other slices of the pie that you could build in now? What's meaning in your life beyond performance? So is it you as a parent or a sibling? Like what else provides your life meaning beyond your athletic ability? Strong mentorship, again, the inner circle, who is around you to support you socially? Mental health literacy, being aware of what are mental health symptoms and signs that something else more significant might be going on. Early transition planning. So starting even when you're healthy, that's my favorite time to talk with athletes about plans for after is while they're healthy. Let's start transitioning now, planning for that. Access to specialized care. So getting help from a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a mental skills coach, someone that can really help you transition proactively rather than reactively when there's a situation. So protection must be built before retirement. And mental health care should really be normalized during someone's peak performance and not introduced after that loss. We talked a little bit about identity diversification being really the core skill. What are your interests outside of sport, values-based self-concept? Who are you outside of that just as a person? How do you identify yourself? What do you value? What do you care about? And then transferable skills awareness. How can you develop skills while you're playing that then translate well outside of your sport? So things like, leadership and resiliency and goal setting, all these things that help during sport and after. So the task really here is translation and not replacement. We need to translate these skills after sport. So just a quick slide too to really point out the role of teams, programs, and organizations. I like this graphic because it really does point out all the people usually involved, whether someone is a collegiate athlete or an elite athlete or a youth athlete. There's usually a lot of people around them. And so I think teams and programs can really do a better job at normalizing mental health care early, not when there's a problem, and then integrating some of those transition conversations into player development. So what are plans after? How can you start building those parts of your identity now? And then supporting identity exploration outside of performance. And I do think some teams do a good job of really promoting, community impact and philanthropic efforts. And those are other slices of the pie too. What sports psychiatry adds at the transition really can help with diagnostic clarity, treatment, medication management if needed, and really just having someone that's with you long term. So having continuity of care, whether that's a psychiatrist, a therapist, a skills coach, it is always helpful to have someone that you could go to that is outside of your family unit. And I do think it's important to reframe retirement. Retirement is not an ending. It's actually just a reorganization of identity and a reallocation of those slices of pie. And I did like this graphic too from the Psychology of Sport and Exercise about preparing, powering, positioning, planning, and then persevering. So I do think that that's a great way to frame this transition from sport. So, some key takeaways, athletic identity should be strong and not singular. Mental health challenges can really be addressed early. Transition success is trainable. You really can train some of this stuff ahead of time, and that the work must begin before the final whistle. So, the people I work with that are most successful in transitioning to retirement are the ones that have been planning for it, have built in other interests, and really have something to look forward to after they're done. So it doesn't feel like a train that's been going 100 miles an hour and then it just comes to a sudden halt. And then I just wanted to highlight too the American Board of Sports and Performance Psychiatry. Really, if you are a parent or an athlete or someone that works with athletes, really, when you are looking for psychiatric support, it is important that someone is certified in sports and performance psychiatry and not just general psychiatry, as there's a lot of nuances to understand in working with athletes. So I did want to leave time for questions. Thank you very, very much for your time and attention. And I would love for any of you to unmute yourself or put a question in the chat, and I would love to hear from you. Hope there's no questions. Thank you for your time, and I hope you all
Oh,
have a
I'll ask
wonderful
a
day.
question,
Oh, go
Dr.
ahead.
Choulet. Yes. Well, how did you get started with working with teams directly, and what is that process of like trying to work with them if there is an athlete that needs help?
Yeah, so it depends on the league and their requirements. So most leagues at this point have a requirement for some sort of mental health clinician to be on site. And that could be a therapist, a psychiatrist, a psychologist. It really just it depends on the team and the league. I got started because I had hired someone on that was a psychologist that was working with the team, and she joined my private group. And it just happened to be the time when teams were required to have a sports psychiatrist as well. And so that's how I got started in a team environment. But now I actually prefer to be on the player association side and a resource where players and their agents contact me directly.
And you have a question in the chat.
Okay, let's
Do
see.
you see it? Oh,
Yes, I do.
okay.
Any suggestions do you have for coaches? What should they be looking for? Do you have any suggestions on how to help athletes feel more comfortable seeking help from the team psychiatrist? That's a great question. So, suggestions for coaches, I think, is really almost like mental health literacy a little bit, is looking up what are some of the signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression or ADHD, and then connecting your players with resources. So, you don't have to do all the jobs. I know coaches already wear many hats, but like that player that shows up late and seems like they're not paying attention, maybe it's not that they don't care. Maybe they do have ADHD. Maybe there is something going on at home, and so just opening up the floor to have some of those conversations with a question like, hey, I noticed you seemed off recently. Has something been going on at home? And just asking these open-ended kind of honest questions to set that stage for a vulnerable moment can be helpful. And then in terms of how to help athletes feel more comfortable seeking help, to me, it all comes down to integration. Like, are the psychiatrists involved from the beginning? Are they a part of the checkpoints on physical day? Because if your athletes are going through dental and ophthalmology and all these things that are normal, so to speak, and you don't have mental health involved, okay, now you've set the stage that it is different and it is stigmatized. So integration really is the key from the beginning.
Um, oh,
Anisha, did I see your hand raised?
yeah, yeah. Well, I
Hi.
didn't. I didn't have a question other than wanting to follow up and kind of see how you have traditionally worked with programs that support student athletes. So I'll do that. But I just want to say thank you so much. This was phenomenal. Um,
Thanks.
the information you shared was really good, and yeah, I'm just grateful for your
Thank
presentation.
you so much. Thanks. And I'm sorry, repeat your question or what you wanted me to expand on?
Oh no, I was saying I'll follow up with you because
Oh, okay.
or you can answer now, like how have you or how do you or how could you
Hmm.
um, support programs that support the development of student athletes, but that might be
Yeah.
missing the mental health piece?
Yeah. So, I mean, it could be a number of ways. It could be a one-off workshop. It could be a name on a piece of paper as a resource. It could be, a number of things. It could be consistent checkpoints throughout the season. It really just depends. So it's very open, and I'd love to talk with you more about that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself. Okay. Well, thank you guys again for the time. This was really, really nice. And I always enjoy talking about the after of sport, not just the during. So thank you again.